Chapter 10. We hitch a ride with dead Confederates. "Thermos!" I screamed as we hurtled towards the water. "What?" Annabeth must have thought I'd lost my mind. She was holding on to the boat straps for dear life, her hair flying straight up like a torch. But Tyson understood. He managed to open my duffel bag and take out Hermes' magical thermos without losing his grip on it or the boat. Arrows and javelins whistled past us. I grabbed the thermos and hoped I was doing the right thing. "Hang on!" "I am hanging on!" Annabeth yelled. "Tighter!" I hooked my feet under the boat's inflatable bench, and as Tyson grabbed Annabeth and me by the backs of our shirts, I gave the thermos cap a quarter turn. Instantly, a white sheet of wind jutted out of the thermos and propelled us sideways, turning our downward plummet into a 45-degree crash landing. The wind seemed to laugh as it shot from the thermos, like it was glad to be free. As we hit the ocean, we bumped once, twice, skipping like a stone. Then we were whizzing along like a speedboat, salt spray in our faces and nothing but sea ahead. I heard a wail of outrage from the ship behind us, but we were already out of weapon range. The Princess Andromeda faded to the size of a white toy boat in the distance, and then it was gone. As we raced over the sea, Annabeth and I tried to send an iris message to Chiron. We figured it was important we let somebody knew what Luke was doing, and we didn't know who else to trust. The wind from the thermos stirred up a nice sea spray that made a rainbow in the sunlight, perfect for an iris message. When Annabeth threw a gold drachma into the mist and prayed for the rainbow goddess to show us Chiron, his face appeared all right, but there was some kind of weird strobe light flashing in the background and rock music blaring, like he was at a dance club. We told him about sneaking away from camp, and Luke and the Princess Andromeda, and the golden box of Kronos' remains. But between the noise on his end and the rushing wind on our end, I'm not sure how much he heard. "Percy," Chiron yelled, "you have to watch out for—" His voice was drowned out by loud shouting behind him, a bunch of voices whooping it up like Comanche warriors. "What?" I yelled. "Curse my relatives!" Chiron ducked as a plate flew over his head and shattered somewhere out of sight. "Annabeth, you shouldn't have let Percy leave camp. But if you do get the fleece—" "Yeah, baby!" somebody behind Chiron yelled. "Woohoo!" The music got cranked up, subwoofers so loud it made our boat vibrate. "Miami!" Chiron was yelling. "I'll try to keep watch." Our misty screen smashed apart like someone on the other side had thrown a bottle at it, and Chiron was gone. An hour later, we spotted land, a long stretch of beach lined with high-rise hotels. The water became crowded with fishing boats and tankers. A Coast Guard cruiser passed on our starboard side, then turned like it wanted a second look. I guess it isn't every day they see a yellow lifeboat with no engine going 100 knots an hour, manned by 3 kids. "That's Virginia Beach," Annabeth said as we approached the shoreline. "Oh my gods, how did the Princess Andromeda travel so far overnight?" "That's like 530 nautical miles," I said. She stared at me. "How did you know that?" I'm not sure." Annabeth thought for a moment. "Percy, what's our position?" 36 degrees, 44 minutes north, 76 degrees, 2 minutes west, I said immediately. Then I shook my head. "Whoa, how did I know that?" "Because of your dad," Annabeth guessed. "When you're at sea, you have perfect bearings. That is so cool." I wasn't sure about that. I didn't want to be a human GPS unit. But before I could say anything, Tyson clapped my shoulder. "Other boat is coming." I looked back. The Coast Guard vessel was definitely on our trail now. Its lights were flashing and it was gaining speed. "We can't let them catch us," I said. "They'll ask too many questions." "Keep going to Chesapeake Bay," Annabeth said. "I know a place we can hide." I didn't ask what she meant or how she knew the area so well. I risked loosening the thermos cap a little more, and a fresh burst of wind sent us rocketing around the northern tip of Virginia Beach to Chesapeake Bay. The Coast Guard boat fell further and further behind. We didn't slow down until the shores of the bay narrowed on either side, and I realized we'd entered the mouth of a river. I could feel the change of salt water to fresh water. Suddenly, I was tired and frazzled, like I was coming down off a sugar high. I didn't know where I was anymore, or which way to steer the boat. It was a good thing Annabeth was directing me. "There," she said, "past that sandbar." We veered into a swampy area, choked with marsh grass. I beached the lifeboat at the foot of a giant cypress. Vine-covered trees loomed above us. Insects chirred in the woods. The air was muggy and hot, and steam curled off the river. Basically, it wasn't Manhattan, and I didn't like it. "Come on," Annabeth said. "It's just down the bank." "What is?" I asked. "Just follow." She grabbed a duffel bag. "And we'd better cover the boat. We don't want to draw attention." After burying the lifeboat with branches, Tyson and I followed Annabeth along the shore, our feet sinking in red mud. A snake slithered past my shoe and disappeared into the grass. "Not a good place," Tyson said. He swatted the mosquitoes that were forming a buffet line on his arm. After another few minutes, Annabeth said, "Here." All I saw was a patch of branches. Then Annabeth moved aside a woven circle of branches like a door, and I realized I was looking into a camouflage shelter. The inside was big enough for 3, even with Tyson being the third. The walls were woven from plant material, like a Native American hut, but they looked pretty waterproof. Stacked in the corner was everything you could want for a campout: sleeping bags, blankets, an ice chest, and a kerosene lamp. There were demigod provisions too: bronze javelin tips, a quiver full of arrows, an extra sword, and a box of ambrosia. The place smelled musty, like it had been vacant for a long time. A half-blood hideout. I looked at Annabeth in awe. "You made this place?" "Thalia and I," she said quietly, "and Luke." That shouldn't have bothered me. I mean, I knew Thalia and Luke had taken care of Annabeth when she was little. I knew the 3 of them had been runaways together, hiding from monsters, surviving on their own before Grover found them and tried to get them to Half-Blood Hill. But whenever Annabeth talked about the time she'd spent with them, I kind of felt, I don't know, uncomfortable? No, that's not the word. The word was jealous. "So," I said, "you don't think Luke will look for us here?" She shook her head. "We made a dozen safe houses like this. I doubt Luke even remembers where they are, or cares." She threw herself down on the blankets, and I started going through her duffel bag. Her body language made it pretty clear she didn't want to talk. Tyson," I said, "would you mind scouting around outside? Like, look for a wilderness convenience store or something?" "Convenience store?" "Yeah, for snacks. Powdered donuts or something. Just don't go too far." "Powdered donuts," Tyson said earnestly. "I will look for powdered donuts in the wilderness." He headed outside and started calling, "Here, donuts!" Once he was gone, I sat down across from Annabeth. "Hey, I'm sorry about, seeing Luke." "It's not your fault." She unsheathed her knife and started cleaning the blade with a rag. "He let us go too easily," I said. I hoped I'd been imagining it, but Annabeth nodded. I was thinking the same thing. What we overheard him say about a gamble, and they'll take the bait. I think he was talking about us. The fleece is the bait? Or Grover? She studied the edge of her knife. I don't know, Percy. Maybe he wants the fleece for himself. Maybe he's hoping we'll do the hard work and then he can steal it from us. I just can't believe he would poison the tree. And I started to wish I hadn't asked her about this while she was holding a knife. Percy, you know who you remind me of most? Thalia. You guys are so much alike, it's scary. I mean, either you would have been best friends or you would have strangled each other. Let's go with best friends. Thalia got angry with her dad sometimes. So do you. Would you turn against Olympus because of that? I stared at the quiver of arrows in the corner. No. Okay then, neither would she. Luke's wrong. Annabeth stuck her knife blade into the dirt. What did he mean? I asked. That Thalia would have been on his side. He's wrong. You don't sound sure. Annabeth glared at me. I wanted to ask her about the prophecy Luke had mentioned and what it had to do with my 16th birthday, but I figured she wouldn't tell me. Chiron had made it pretty clear that I wasn't allowed to hear it until the gods decided otherwise. So what did Luke mean about Cyclopes? I asked. He said you of all people. I know what he said. He was talking about the real reason Thalia died. I waited, not sure what to say. Annabeth drew a shaky breath. You could never trust a Cyclops, Percy. 6 years ago, on the night Grover was leading us to Half-Blood Hill. She was interrupted when the door of the hut creaked open. Tyson crawled in. Powdered donuts, he said proudly, holding up a pastry box. Annabeth stared at him. This is bad, Annabeth muttered. We were crouching behind a tree, staring at the donut shop in the middle of the woods. It looked brand new, with brightly lit windows. Where did you get that? We're in the middle of the wilderness. There's nothing around for 50 feet, Tyson said. Monster donut shop, just over the hill. A parking area and a little road leading off into the forest. But there was nothing else around, and no cars parked in the lot. We could see one employee reading a magazine behind the cash register. That was it. On the store's marquee, in huge black letters that even I could read, it said, Monster Donut. A cartoon ogre was taking a bite out of the O in monster. The place smelled good, like fresh baked chocolate donuts. This shouldn't be here, Annabeth whispered. It's wrong. What? I asked. It's a donut shop. Shh. Why are we whispering? Tyson went in and bought a dozen. Nothing happened to him. He's a monster. Aw, come on, Annabeth. Monster Donut doesn't mean monsters. It's a chain. We've got them in New York. A chain, she agreed. And don't you think it's strange that one appeared immediately after you told Tyson to get donuts? Right here in the middle of the woods? I thought about it. It did seem a little weird, but, I mean, donut shops weren't real high on my list of sinister forces. It could be a nest, Annabeth explained. Tyson whimpered. I doubt he understood what Annabeth was saying any better than I did, but her tone was making him nervous, and was getting powdered sugar all over his face. A nest for what? I asked. Haven't you ever wondered how franchise shops pop up so fast? She asked. One day there's nothing, and then the next day, boom, there's a new burger place, or a coffee shop, or whatever. Just a single store, then 2, then 4. Exact replicas spreading across the country. No, never thought about it. Percy, some of the chains multiply so fast because all their locations are magically linked to the life force of a monster. Some children of Hermes figured out how to do it back in the 1950s. They bred... She froze. What? I demanded. They bred what? He'd plowed through half a dozen donuts from his box. No sudden moves, Annabeth said, like her life depended on it. Very slowly, turn around. Then I heard it, a scraping noise, like something large dragging its belly through the leaves. I turned and saw a rhino-sized thing moving through the shadows of the trees. It was hissing, its front half writhing in all different directions. I couldn't understand what I was seeing at first. Then I realized the thing had multiple necks. At least 7, each topped with a hissing reptilian head. Its skin was leathery, and under each neck it wore a plastic bib that read, "I'm a monster donut kid." I took out my ballpoint pen, but Annabeth locked eyes with me. A silent warning, not yet. I understood. A lot of monsters have terrible eyesight. It was possible the Hydra might pass us by, but if I uncapped my sword now, the bronze glow would certainly get its attention. We waited. The Hydra was only a few feet away. It seemed to be sniffing the ground and the trees like it was hunting for something. Then I noticed that 2 of the heads were ripping apart a piece of yellow canvas, one of our duffel bags. The thing had already been to our campsite. It was following our scent. My heart pounded. I'd seen a stuffed Hydra head trophy at camp before, but that did nothing to prepare me for the real thing. Each head was diamond-shaped, like a rattlesnake's, but the mouths were lined with jagged rows of shark-like teeth. Tyson was trembling. He stepped back and accidentally snapped a twig. Immediately, all 7 heads turned toward us and hissed. "Scatter!" Annabeth yelled. She dove to the right. I rolled to the left. One of the Hydra heads spat an arc of green liquid that shot past my shoulder and splashed against an elm. The trunk smoked and began to disintegrate. The whole tree toppled straight toward Tyson, who still hadn't moved, petrified by the monster that was now right in front of him. "Tyson!" I tackled him with all of my might, knocking him aside just as the Hydra lunged and the tree crashed on top of 2 of its heads. The Hydra stumbled backwards, yanking its heads free, then wailing in outrage at the fallen tree. All 7 heads shot acid, and the elm melted into a steaming pool of muck. "Move," I told Tyson. I ran to one side and uncapped Riptide, hoping to draw the monster's attention. It worked. The sight of celestial bronze is hateful to most monsters. As soon as my glowing blade appeared, the Hydra whipped toward it with all its heads, hissing and baring its teeth. The good news, Tyson was momentarily out of danger. The bad news, I was about to be melted to a puddle of goo. One of the heads snapped at me experimentally. Without thinking, I swung my sword. "No!" Annabeth yelled. Too late. I sliced the Hydra's head clean off. It rolled away into the grass, leaving a flailing stump, which immediately stopped bleeding and began to swell like a balloon. In a matter of seconds, the wounded neck split into 2 necks, each of which grew a full-size head. Now I was looking at an 8-headed Hydra. "Percy!" Annabeth shouted. "You just opened another monster donut shop somewhere." I dodged a spray of acid. "I'm about to die, and you're worried about that? How do we kill it?" "Fire," Annabeth said. "We have to have fire." As soon as she said that, I remembered the story. The Hydra's heads would only stop multiplying if we burned the stumps before they grew. That's what Heracles had done anyway, but we had no fire. I backed up towards River. The Hydra followed. Annabeth moved in on my left and tried to distract one of the heads, parrying its teeth with her knife, but another head swung sideways like a club and knocked her into the muck. No hitting my friends! Tyson charged in, putting himself between the Hydra and Annabeth. As Annabeth got to her feet, Tyson started smashing at the monsters' heads with his fist so fast it reminded me of the whack-a-mole game at the arcade. But even Tyson couldn't fend off the Hydra forever. We kept inching backward, dodging acid splashes and deflecting snapping heads without cutting them off. But I knew we were only postponing our deaths. Eventually, we would make a mistake and the thing would kill us. Then I heard a strange sound, a chug, 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 that at first I thought was my heartbeat. It was so powerful it made the riverbank shake. "What's that noise?" Annabeth shouted, keeping her eyes on the Hydra. "Steam engine," Tyson said. "What?" I ducked as the Hydra spat acid over my head. Then from the river behind us, a familiar female voice shouted, "There! Prepare the 32-pounder!" I didn't dare look away from the Hydra, but if it was who I thought it was behind us, I figured we now had enemies on two fronts. A gravelly male voice said, "They're too close, my lady." "Damn the heroes," the girl said. "Full steam ahead." "Aye, my lady." "Fire at will, Captain." Annabeth understood what was happening a split second before I did. She yelled, "Hit the dirt!" And we dove for the ground as an earth-shattering boom echoed from the river. There was a flash of light, a column of smoke, and the Hydra exploded right in front of us, showering us with nasty green slime that vaporized as soon as it hit, the way monster guts tend to do. "Gross!" screamed Annabeth. "Steamship!" yelled Tyson. I stood, coughing from the cloud of gunpowder smoke that was rolling across the banks. Chugging towards us down the river was the strangest ship I'd ever seen. It rode low in the water like a submarine, its deck plated with iron. In the middle was a trapezoid-shaped casemate with slats on each side for cannons, a flag waved from the top, a wild boar, and a spear on a blood-red field. Lining the deck were zombies in gray uniforms, dead soldiers with shimmering faces that only partially covered their skulls, like the ghouls I'd seen in the underworld guarding Hades' palace. The ship was an ironclad, a Civil War battle cruiser. I could just make out the name along the prow in moss-covered letters, CSS Birmingham. And standing next to the smoking cannon that had almost killed us, wearing full Greek battle armor, was Clarisse. "Losers," she sneered, "but I suppose I have to rescue you. Come aboard."